Hey, future Megan here, editing the video, and I realized that my intro was really distracting because of some glare from ring lights, and I'm trying to not have glare from my TV and computers in the background as well, but glass is life. But I wanted to go ahead and share the important points. So the first thing is that I'm making some fabric masks. These are not meant to replace like an N95 type of mask, but it is currently being recommended by the CDC that folks wear these kind of masks out doing errands and things like that, mostly to protect the community. And so I share some methods for that. And I'll share some information below from the CDC about some tutorials and some things you can use as filters and things like that. But the biggest two takeaways that I wanted to give is, number one, this is not meant to actually keep you from getting sick. The intention is it couldn't hurt. Maybe it could help, but a fabric mask is not going to do what an N95 does. Not even a surgical mask is that great at filtering out potential viral contagions from being breathed in and things like that. This is more meant to help lessen the chance of you spreading something to someone else, and hopefully help lessen the chance of you potentially breathing something in. But this is by no means meant to be an excuse to not social distance or to do any of the other practices the CDC recommends. The second thing that I just wanted to caution people about is that sometimes seeing people wearing masks and gloves can be really comforting, but you don't want to take for granted that people know how to use those things properly. When you use a pair of gloves and you touch something, you should immediately, before touching anything else, get rid of them. Sanitize your hands, and if you choose to re-glove, put on another pair. And if you see people around in public, a lot of people aren't doing that. We don't have hundreds of pairs of gloves to do that with as we go grocery shopping. And so that's fine, but using gloves and thinking suddenly I'm protected because I'm wearing them, it doesn't work if you touch stuff at the grocery store and your phone and your keys and your wallet all while wearing the same pair of gloves without replacing them, right? So we still need to be sanitizing our personal items, sanitizing the things that we buy. When you wear a mask, you shouldn't be touching it while you're out and about. So once it's on, it pretty much needs to stay like left alone. When you go to take it off, I'll leave some guidelines in the description from the CDC about like washing, taking it off, getting it immediately in the laundry, washing your hands again, because again, that could have come into contact with just anything, even if it's not the particular virus everyone seems most concerned about now, like the flu, someone with a cold, whatever, that anything you come into contact with in the day could also be on the outside of that mask. So you want to make sure you're doing your very best to keep yourself safe by following all of the recommendations. Don't use this as kind of a false comfort of, okay, I have a mask and I have gloves, therefore I am safe. You have to use them properly in order to keep yourself safe. But if nothing else, helping out others in the community by hopefully not spreading something if you do have it, and to help you and your family by hopefully lessening your chance of getting something if you use these interventions properly, I think is worth it. So in this video, I'll show you a couple methods for making face masks, and take it or leave it or whatever, but enjoy. On the masks, you're going to need a couple of supplies. You're going to need something to measure with. So if you have a ruler, measuring tape, something like that, that would work totally fine. I like using my nice large cutting mat that I got specifically for fabric use, personally, because I can get a lot done on this, and it helps me just make sure everything's square and good to go. And it also allows me to use my rotary cutter. You could use some other surface that's cut safe and still use a rotary cutter, but I find that these two things work together really well. The nice thing about a rotary cutter is you just slide kind of like a pizza roller and get nice cuts. So that's something that I highly recommend if you don't own. Rotary cutters are great, especially if you're doing large quantities of things, need straight lines, things like that, but really good for any fabric use. If you don't have that, you do need a pair of scissors. You can use any scissors, but I highly recommend using a pair of fabric shears. These are going to cut through your fabric a lot nicer. Just make sure that your fabric shears are not used on paper. Once they've been used on paper, they're kind of no good to you, especially the more that they're used on paper. So make sure to have your cutting shears put somewhere safe and away from anyone who might want to use them on paper. I have lost a couple of decent pairs of cutting shears that way. I also brought this ruler today. I wanted something with a nice hard surface and a very clear straight edge to help use when I measure out my pieces, so that I can use that against the edge of the rotary cutter to make sure that things are nice and smooth on those lines, just to make things easier for me later. It's not necessary, but I do like that. And then the last thing you need is fabric. And I have tons of options, but I'm going to start with this Deathly Hallows fabric today, just because I'm a big Harry Potter fan. And as you can see, this is actually left over from another project. I was making aprons, and I folded the fabric in half to make it easier to cut a mirror image, and then I accidentally cut the fold side instead of the open side. So instead of making an apron shape, I made almost a tank top halter shape, which was not what I was going for, but that left me with some fabric to use for other purposes. So for this particular project, I'm going to be cutting a 9" by 14" piece of fabric. The intention is that the 9 inches will be the width of the mask, so that goes kind of from ear to ear, and then the 14 inches is sort of the length of the mask, and it's going to end up being folded in half, so the final mask will be slightly smaller than 9 inches wide by 7 inches high, because there will be some loss to seam allowance, sewing, and all of that. So I want to make sure that I face my fabric in such a way that it will be a nice looking mask. Now you have a couple of options with this. You could use one piece of fabric and cut a 9 by 7 piece, and use another type of fabric for the backing if you would like, or just one 9 by 14 piece. For my sake, just doing this quickly and efficiently, I'm going to be doing 9 by 14 and go from there. I want to make sure that the mask kind of reads as Deathly Hallows. There is text on it, so I want to make sure that that text is visible when being used. And like makes sense and isn't turned sideways on someone's face. So I'm going to make sure that the 14-inch measurement is from here to here, so that the text is still readable. Something that you can do if you're making multiple at a time as well, that can be helpful, is you can fold it in half if you know that your fabric is pretty much in good shape to go. Take 2 straight edges, and that makes it a little easier to handle and quicker to cut. Probably should iron this first, but I'm kind of doing this the quick and dirty way, so we'll just deal with that. And that's it. So now I have almost a 14-inch piece. Now I'm going to come back, line this up, and go ahead and trim this off so it is actually 14 inches. This is a step you could skip because you're going to lose a little bit in seam allowance and things like that. Anyway, you could just kind of bury it there, but I want this to be nice. Now I have a piece of fabric that is 14 inches tall and more than 9 inches wide. So now the next step is to cut our 9-inch width. Got a little 4" by 14" piece if we need trim. You could also take some of your excess fabric if you wanted to use it to make ties or sort of bias taping. So we might use this for something. Hold this off to the side to possibly use later, along with, because I had this wonky fabric, I have plenty of kind of pieces left. Now if I wanted to, I might be able to even get, let's see, I can get 9 inches starting here. So I actually could make another mask out of these pieces. I just will have to actually use 2 pieces instead of 1. So I can actually make 3 Deathly Hallows masks. So I think I'm going to go ahead and cut out to use that as well. So as you can see, that is about exactly the same, it should be anyway, as half of the large one, because we're basically cutting 2 pieces put together instead of using just one big one. So that'll totally work. And then I still have plenty of fabric left over to use this trim again. Now we we have enough pieces cut to make 3 Deathly Hallows masks. These 2 together to make 1, 2, and 3. So I hope I know some Harry Potter fans. If not, I'll definitely be keeping one of these for myself. So then the next step is going to be to face the right sides together. And if you have a piece like this that is already connected, all you're gonna have to do once you folded this together is sew the widest seam together. You won't even have to worry about sewing this side because that's already connected. Now what I'm going to do that's a little different is I'm actually going to be folding in such a way that I have a little bit of a pocket to use, but we should have about 1 inch of overlap, which will be great. So what's going to end up happening here is I'm going to have to kind of sew under and make a little hem on each side, and then when this gets flipped right side out and is sewn up all nice and beautifully with basically something that kind of looks like this, where if you just move your hand here, kind of go under, you have a place to put in some extra fabric if you felt like that was something you needed, some sort of filtering substance, whatever works for you. So if you want to be able to fit something in, that's a really great way to go. So that's what I'm going to do with this one, but I might also just make one super simple where I just sew them together. I'm going to get my sewing machine out and get sewing. Here's my tried and true sewing machine. I've had it since I was 16 years old. I was that nerdy kid who wanted a sewing machine for my sweet 16 instead of something else, I guess. And now I'm 30, so do the math on that. This thing's been around almost half my life. So a nice Singer Prelude, super simple, does what I needed to do. I've already got it preloaded with the correct thread in the bobbin and all of that good stuff. I'm using a nice dark navy blue that will match the Deathly Hallows fabric. So what I'm going to do, let me move some of this out of the way. I'm going to use one of the large pieces that we cut before, 9 by 14. I'm going to put the right sides facing each other, wrong sides facing out, and just line up the edges of the fabric. And I'm going to be cutting along this seam here and just leaving a little bit of a seam allowance. I'm not even going to really bother. You do what you would like for yours, but basically just doing one line down and turning this into like a tube, a very wide tube. All right, and it is as easy as that. We now have a tube. So the next part of this can be done turned right side out, so we're gonna flip this. I think I'm gonna do this so that the seam is facing the bottom for the sake of just, I think, having it look a little nicer on the top. If you're sewing 2 pieces together, then you'll have a seam on top and bottom, and that is totally fine. I'm going to bring out some pins. Move the sewing machine to the side for a moment. Bring out some pins here. One of the kind of pattern sites that I saw suggested going ahead now and pleating down, so adding a couple pleats in. I think they did about 3, 1 every inch or so down the side, and same thing on the other, and that makes it look like a masqué. And then sewing that, adding elastic, and then kind of covering the edges. What I would actually like to do, and I think that that would make it look just a little bit nicer and more put together, is I'm going to go ahead and turn in just about a 1/4 inch or so of the fabric to go ahead and make it a nice seam, and add in my elastic now and pleat kind of all in one fell swoop, especially since I have a thread that really matches the fabric. This will make it, I think, look really nice. So I'm going to do that. Now I'm going to bring out my bucket. I have some buckets of some ribbon and things like that to use for some projects later. But what I put in here is, I thankfully, being the low-level hoarder that I am, do have some elastic. I have tons of these little like cheapo thin hair ties. So these could be perfect for sewing in and kind of putting behind the ears, but I think that these are a little too small. However, from some previous crafting and DIYing, I have acquired a bunch of these just really inexpensive head wraps. So basically headbands in a variety of colors. There's some hair ties here too, but a bunch of just headbands. I think I'm just going to use these black ones. So got these at the dollar store like a while ago, and held on to them because, you know, they come in handy. Now in the tutorials I've seen, they've suggested about 6 inches of elastic, and then the way that they've done it, they've buried very little of it, so it's essentially been about 6 inches of elastic. These have about double that. So what I actually might do is take one of these and cut them in half. Maybe that'll be the thing. So maybe I'll have to cut. That's okay though, we'll be sewing it in, so that should help reinforce. So let's double check on this ruler. Yes, I have more than 12 inches, but so we'll go ahead and just split that right in the middle and make them just a little longer than 6 inches. They actually turn out to be about 7, which is perfect because I'm going to do about a ½ inch of seam allowance on each side when I bury these in, and go ahead and tuck these in as well. So what'll happen is basically we're kind of folding in a hem, or if it's easier to see before I go too far, we can actually do it this way, folding about a ½ inch or so. I might actually do a little less and do about a ¼ inch. It just makes it harder to sew, so be careful if you're new at this, maybe closer to ½ inch. But I think that this is about a quarter, yeah, a little over a ¼ inch on these. And then I'm going to lay in the elastics about 1 inch from the top. Well, actually, we'll have to turn that right side out, so hold that thought. And we'll make sure that this goes further than the fabric because we do have a little bit to work with. You can go about ½ inch in on each if you cut those elastics a little bit farther, and it should still be an okay size. And then I'm going to poke this through both the fabric and the elastic to make sure that that holds in there. And about 6 inches still out, so that's perfect. We basically have a rectangle with some elastics. I think this one might need to come up just a little bit to be even with the other side, with elastics pinned in about 1 inch from each side. So now what I'm going to do is go ahead and put the pleats as well. So after this first one, I'm just going to add a little bit of kind of a pleat here, probably about a ¼ inch, maybe even a little bit less. Just going to kind of eyeball it, and because I'm already using a pin here on this elastic and I don't want to lose that, I'm just going to put one more to hold this pleat, and then again I'm going to mirror that on the other side. And the reason I'm going from that one is this is actually kind of the top because of where the words are. So, and I kind of want it so that the pleats are going from top to bottom, that way the nose is comfortable and not kind of buried under a pleat. I don't know if that's really a reason, it just feels right to me. So when pleated, it'll look something like this. So the edges are just a little bit more gathered, but then the inside has more space. This allows for it to kind of stretch out for your mouth, but kind of come in a little bit. And actually, I might adjust those pleats in just a little bit to gather in a little bit more. Alright, so now that this is all pinned up and ready to go, all that there is to do at this point is sew up each side, do a nice seam up each side of the mask, and we should be good to go. Left with something that looks a little bit like this. One of my sides, the pleats kind of came out a little nicer than the other, but something that could be easy enough to do is like this one where the pleat isn't beautiful. I can just kind of give it another little tuck and go. I think the reason it had an issue was where the elastic was, kind of created an issue. And then just to make sure that you're good to go, tug on your sides, make sure that they're securely in there, your elastics aren't going anywhere. All right, now this next one is the one that I am going to be trying to make a pocket for a filter in case this is something that people are interested in doing. So we're going to face our fabric right side up and just kind of pay attention to what side's up and down. For my sake, I think I want to make it where the pocket is kind of like the top of the mask would be here, and I want it to be where the pocket is one that you have to go like under then over, just for the sake of extra protection. If it went this way when you were wearing it, it would just be one direction and you're immediately into the pocket. And the thing I don't like about that is while you're using it, breathing, whatever, it just feels a little less secure. So I'm going to overlap it this way. Now that we kind of know how that's going to look, we're going to have to fold under and do some hemming. So I'm going to fold under the raw edges on both sides and go ahead and get that a really quick, nice hem. That's complete, the sides are done, and now I'm going to fold under and then over just enough to make a little pocket. So we're just going to have it overlap just the littlest bit so that you can slip your hand in to change out a filter, but it's not too obtrusive. Alright, so now what I'm going to do, the exact same step as last time, I'm going to place my elastic, pin, and go ahead and do all of that stuff from the side, kind of do the over hem, all of that. But what I'm going to do here first, just to make sure that I don't mess up the way that these are overlapped, is go ahead and pin just one layer of the fabric, putting kind of the seams together. So we still have a tube. I haven't attached it to this side yet, just so that we can kind of maneuver, but leave that good to go. Just like the other one, I'm going to pleat. Now with these insides, it makes it a little more tricky because I don't want to have a pleat that obscures the ability to use this. So actually what we might do is go a little smaller with our pleats and actually just kind of feed it in as I go instead of pinning it out in advance. And I'm going to sew this, even though this is the front side and this is the top, I'm going to sew it where I can see these, so I make sure that when I pleat, I don't obstruct the ability of this pocket to be used. Because if we do too many pleats, then it's going to be hard to get something in and out of here and make it hard for a filter to be put in. So I'm going to do really small pleats, maybe one above and one below where that pocket is, and just keep it super simple and small. Now you'll see one pleat on the top kind of came through here. And it looks quite nice down here. The pleat didn't really show up on the front as much, so I'm going to actually do this top one more time and try to get that pleat a little more solid. And I think that pleat shows up much nicer that time. And we'll do the same thing to the other side. So here is that finished mask. Looks something like this. Not super beautiful, but it'll get the job done. And if I flip it over, you can see the pocket. You can put your hand in, slide something in. Here, look, a transaction register, like I've got checks. So we're gonna put this in down, pull that over the top. If it's something taller, you can kind of finagle it in just like you would. Ladies, if you use swimsuits and have those little like cup inserts that come out sometimes, or if you have one of those pillowcases that overlaps, you've got that good to go. And then you're ready to wear and have a little extra protection inside if that's something that suits you. So here is that type of mask, side by side, with the sort of more traditional style. And for the sake of functionality and wearability, to kind of show you, this is the one with a pocket. And it is just as simple as putting it behind your ear on either side, making sure it stays over your nose, and you're good to go. My glasses are already fogging up. But here's a mask. If the fit of this doesn't suit you and you want to have a couple other options, you can always, in something like this, add a little bit of maybe wire. So I've seen some people use pipe cleaner as a nice wire source to kind of embed at the top and then to be able to form the top. What I might do is, if this was for me, adjust the pleats a little bit so that the sides come down, but it still covers up all the way from the top of my nose to my chin. So something that I notice for me, the way that my kind of body works, is it might be a little high up here on the eye region. So if I were to just pull down these corners a little bit and just sew those down, already I'm not having that particular issue, and it still covers all the way to the bottom and all the way up to the top. For this one without the additional pocket, same idea, behind both ears, from top to bottom, and you have with those pleats the ability to stretch it out quite tall, so if you have a long face, or kind of crunch it up shorter if you don't, and adjust those pleats, and you're good to go. Ta-da!